Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, flying solo. We had Pete on this morning doing this thing with the MLB. I was going to join him, do the do thing, but the slate wasn't up yet. As soon as the show went live, of course, the slate did go live. So, as promised, we wanted to cover this last group stage slate for you guys. It's a 4-game women's basketball slate. Some good games here. Still some seedings to go through. Pricing adjustments, all kinds of good stuff. A 1K to first prize. I know that's not the biggest prize in the world to some of you, but still grinding in the niche sports. Anytime we can get a 1K to first type of tournament, we need to take advantage. So knockout stages right around the corner. Men's finished up last night. They will be having their quarterfinal start tomorrow evening. And then you expect the women's slate right around there too. So we probably have like 2, maybe 3 non-2-game slates left. So take advantage while you can. And this will lead right into summer league. So those of you who want to grind summer league DFS, I know FanDuel has said they're not going to have it. They're seemingly going towards a sports book type of thing, but DraftKings will have it. So we'll be covering the summer league for you guys. There's big edge there, especially with starting lineups. So expect lots of niche sports stuff. Sorry for the noise in the background. I got kids, so we just have to roll with it as we go. You guys know me, Walter Waddell, aka Deuce85. Niche sports is what I do. We've been grinding some Aussie football. The Olympics have been profitable. Doing all kinds of stuff. We're offering some soccer stuff again, so just be on the lookout for that. Pete's been carrying us with Major League Baseball. Next week, in just a few days really, CFL, Canadian Football League, will be starting. They had canceled their season last year because of the fact that COVID ran rampant. They couldn't handle it. We are going to have that big slate, a big prize pool for that. Pete and I will be covering that next week, so be on the lookout for that. CFL is one of those niche sports that in our repertoire that we're going to do damage at and make a lot of money. 2 years ago when I was around, it's extremely profitable. I came into it mid-season, picked it up quite fast, and just from a game theory / leverage standpoint, there's a lot of opportunities for you to make good money at it. You guys know I'm a pretty big leverage player at this point. I still mess with cash games and stuff, but I'm a very big chalk fader when it makes sense. So I'll have lots of game theory-ish type stuff for you in that. And then just, grinding away here in the Olympics. Lots of good stuff. We do have a promo. The first 2 months you sign up are half off. So instead of paying the $50 price, you'll be paying $25 each month for the first 2. We still have a weekly rate if you're just trying us out, but with college football right around the corner in terms of 3, maybe 4 weeks, August week 2, which is basically next week and a half, we're going to have preview shows by conference, Big 10, SEC, Pac-12, getting you guys ready for each team just to know what players Pete and I like in terms of these are the studs, here's sneaky plays, here's guys we think are going to be popular but maybe won't produce as well, and here's the reasons why. So lots of information for you to digest. Not just a college basketball guy. I know you guys know me for that a lot, but I've kind of really opened up my repertoire lately over the last year or two since coming over to Your Fielder's Choice. Very happy here, like what the site's doing, and I'm going to keep giving you guys top-notch content, until I can't anymore. But with that being said, let's break down this 4-game women's slate. If you guys are watching live and you have any questions in the YouTube stream there on your right in the live chat, feel free. I'll answer those as we go. If you're watching on demand, feel free to DM me, tweet at me on Twitter at Deuce85, or go into our Your Fielder's Choice Discord. Tag me in the general room if you're not a sub yet, ask your questions, or go into the premium room, tag me, ask your questions there. All right, so the first game on the slate is Japan versus Nigeria. This one is a total of 148.5. It is the lowest over-under of the slate. Right now, Japan's an 11-point favorite over Nigeria. I've really expanded my betting stuff, wagering, whatnot. I do think the Nigeria plus 11 would be a good spot to target here. I don't think Japan's 11 points better than them. Japan does play a brand of basketball that's extremely fast. Can give teams trouble. Nigeria, they have trouble scoring at times. So there is a potential for Japan, if they get hot from 3, especially like they did against the U.S. Just 2 nights ago, for them to possibly cover. But like I said, I would really just think that Nigeria covers that. Looks like the over-under has just popped to 150 as I'm talking here on the DK Sportsbook there. So people seemingly betting the over on it. This is a game where, I'm just going to be looking at for GPP purposes. Don't really have anyone in my scopes necessarily for my main lineup. I do like a whole lot from the Nigeria side of things. Promise Kamara has played with the Arizona State in college. She's been a big-time producer for Nigeria. In that second game there, she played 31 minutes against France. The game before against USA, she played 26. She's taken just under 30 shots in those 2 games. She is rather scoring reliant. You'll see she's averaging right around 24 fantasy points per game. So an 8-9 is not necessarily a great price tag for her, but she is by far the highest usage play on Nigeria. You give her a shorter team like Japan. She is a player that can hit threes, but she also does a lot of her game as a kind of an off-ball guard, backing down into the paint, where she can do some damage. So I could actually see her produce pretty well here, with sub 15% ownership. Nigeria does run one of those rotations a lot like the men's team. Those of you who are familiar, they kind of run a deep rotation, right? 12, 13 guys. So the women's they're not quite as aggressive there, but they definitely run a larger rotation. So it's a little bit difficult to really, be in on them from an optimal standpoint. Looking at them though, like I said, Promise is really the play. Anyone else I'd be probably looking at potentially. I think Victoria Mcauley at 5'3" is interesting. Again, bigs against Japan have been eating. Her minutes are a little rough. They're right around 18.5 per game. She does have one game of 25 fantasy points, one of 14. The 25 was against the U.S., which she had 11 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals. She has taken 18 total shots in the 2 games, but she's only shooting 30%. So the volume is there for Victoria. If you're looking for, like I said, a sneakier play where most people are going to be fading this first game and you're running multiple lineups like I intend to do, getting some Nigeria exposure makes a ton of sense. But I would really limit it to Amo Kamara or Mcauley. On the Japan side of things, they're a very spread out team. There's really nobody that I would find being in the lineup for optimal wise. Ryu Machida at 4'8" is interesting. Their highest usage play. She is averaging right around 27 fantasy points per game. She's averaging 11 assists per game. So she's really the main key cog of the offense. She's initiating everything, pushing the pace. She had 14 shot attempts against the U.S., which was pretty damn impressive. She only made 4, but that type of volume can't be understated. So at 4'8", she makes sense. The prices on some of the higher end players, Emma Miesemann, Stewie, Asia Wilson, Brittany Griner, who we're going to talk about here, they did do a good job of making their prices go higher. So you're going to have value. There's probably 4 main value plays on this slate, and I think Rui Machida is definitely one of them. Knowing the Nigerian defense isn't that good, I could certainly get behind, potentially using her. And then it's really just whoever's going to have the hot hand. Nobody on China is above 6'7". Saki Hayashi is there at 6'4". She's had a couple games over, 18 fantasy points. Nagakawa, Motohashe. There's just a lot of meh plays here for Japan. So really, if you're targeting anyone in this game, Rui Machida is your Japanese exposure, and then on the Nigerian side, Mcauley or Omo Kamara is what you're looking at. Otherwise, if you're running cash games, head-to-heads, looking for that optimal and single entry, you're mainly going to be fading this game. On the next game here, USA versus France. This one's a 156 over-under. Typically, USA games are the highest over-under total. They are minus 13-point favorites. USA has been struggling to put teams away. The Nigerian team, I think they lost by under 10 points. And then Japan had a game where they were over by 2 at the end of the first quarter, and even at halftime, they were pushing. They were shooting extremely hot from long range, and that is the way to beat this USA team. So France is going to be looking to, shoot threes and whatnot. Plus 13 point line is pretty interesting for them. Most definitely. Starting with the French side, they're a more spread out team as well. There's 3 main players you're going to want to look at for DFS purposes. Sandrine Gruda, their big center. She's there at 6K. She's averaging 30 fantasy points. She has back-to-back 30s. She doesn't necessarily have the slate breaking upside that you'd be looking for if you're going to fade, the US bigs or, somebody like Emma Miesemann from Belgium in your GPP lineups. But she is rock solid, that's a 5x score that she's returning at her 6K salary. She's not going to put up the 40 or 50, really separate you from the field, but she has a really nice mid-range play. She's taken 28 shots in 2 games. She's averaging 9 rebounds, 16 real points, and right around, a half block per game. So I definitely think she's in play. She's probably my 3rd favorite French play of the group of 3 that I'm talking about. Second best, Marine Johannes. She was really popular in the first game against Japan. She's really the best player on the France's team. She is a sniper from long range. She plays for the New York Liberty over in the WNBA, which she's missed the last 2 seasons to focus on overseas stuff, but we do expect her to be in WNBA next year. She'll fit really well in that Liberty fast-paced offense. But she's a gunner. She hasn't been starting, which is a shocker. The game against Japan in which France lost a lot of people, myself included, thought it was because she only played 16 minutes. She still had the volume though. She had 13 fantasy points in 16 minutes, which isn't horrible. Obviously, we want more than that, but if you look at the minutes wise, it's not a bad score. In 23 minutes against Nigeria, in a much more comfortable win for the French team, she did hit 2 of her 5 threes, 13 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, a couple of steals, a block, 30 fantasy points. That's what she's capable of. So 7-4 again. She's a GPP spot for sure against the Americans. I think they'll have to play her more if they want to win. Marine has that WNBA experience. So I do look for her to not get too rattled. Like I said, 3-point shooters have been giving the U.S. a lot of issues. They have Brittany Griner, Stewie, Asia Wilson, Sylvia Fowles, Tina Charles, a lot of these bigs that can really shut down the paint defensively. So French, the French team's going to have a hard time scoring down low, so they're going to need Marine to jack up threes. Wish she was a little cheaper, obviously, but she's definitely in play for GPPs. And then lastly is Gabby Williams. She's recently been, well, not recently, but within a month or two, been traded to the LA Sparks. She was suspended this year in the WNBA because she chose to play overseas. They just make it a suspension so that she's off the books for that year. She's only 4'9". She's really one of these players that's excelling in FIBA/international play. But if you play the WNBA DFS, you'll look at Gabby Williams. I think she's kind of just a role player, which she has been. But back-to-back games of 33-plus fantasy points against Japan and Nigeria. She has 7 steals in 2 games, really taking advantage of that Nigerian, offense that turns it over a lot in Japan. U.S. has been turning the ball over a lot more than you would think with guards like Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi. So still opportunities for her to get steals. It's hard to project steals, but she should get some. She's averaging 4.5 assists in the 2 games, 6.5 rebounds, and 11 points. So she does a little bit of all. Takes threes, 2 for 8 from downtown in 2 games. She's 8 for 21 from the field otherwise, so high volume there, and just 4.9, which is a really cheap price for her. She really should be 6 or 7K. She's going to find life a little more difficult down low. She's not going to be blocking shots of Brittany Griner, and it's going to be harder for her to get rebounds. But at 4.9, it's a really nice value play. And as I mentioned, there's about 3 or 4 values under 5K you can use to make your lineup really, really strong. And she's definitely one of them. I am treading lightly with the French team because it seems like there's no middle ground here against the U.S. lately. They're either going to, completely shut down the middle, or the other team's going to push them hard, kind of like Nigeria did, and there's going to be a couple fantasy scorers. So I think Gabby's probably number 1, followed by Johannes and then Gruda in terms of the French exposure that you're looking for. U.S., I've been a big Brittany Griner fan. She's plus 18 so far, plus minus. Every time she's on the floor, U.S. extends their lead. For some reason, Coach Don Staley just is not playing her much. I don't understand it. 20 minutes in the first game against Nigeria, which was a close game. She had a size advantage. She had a size advantage against Japan. She played only 16 minutes, but she took 11 shots. She had 24 fantasy points in 16 minutes against Japan. So if she would have played the 27 that I had her projected for, she would have busted Slate open with a 40 or 50 really easily. And she was the cheapest at 9.5, almost a grand and a half cheaper than Stewie. The game before that against Nigeria, she had 34 in 20 minutes. So if Griner gets the minutes, she will squash the slate. France has a lot more size than the 2 teams they faced previously, but Griner's an unstoppable force in FIBA play. She did turn the ball over 7 times against Nigeria, and that was simply because every time she got the switched on to a smaller defender, she got a little too excited. She either hooked or got an offensive foul, or just double dribble, did something silly in the paint and got a little too excited, or else she would have had a bigger score. Right now, it's going to be tough to justify using her in your main lineup because of the minutes only. But for GPP, she's going to be 15 to 20% owned on this 4-game slate with just a high of upside as the popular Stewie and Asia Wilson. So you have that leverage there. If this was a game where France keeps it close, or because they have the size and they need Griner on the floor to play 25 to 28 minutes, you will be sorry not having exposure to her. I guarantee that. So the fact that she's averaging 17 minutes per game, but just under 30 fantasy points per game is pretty amazing. The popular players for U.S., as always, going to be Asia Wilson, whose price has come up to 9.9, back-to-back 40 burgers. She's been playing upper 20s minutes, the minutes I assumed Griner would play. Back-to-back double-double. She's averaging 20 and 12. She's a big-time scorer. I think I'll certainly have exposure to her. And then Stewie is that one that she's always high-owned in WNBA. She's always high-owned in FIBA play. And fading makes a lot of sense. That first game against Nigeria, she had 30 fantasy points. And even, at sitting here at 10.8, almost 11K, last game against Japan, she had 46. That still could have been a fade. If Griner would have played the minutes we thought and matched her, we would have been way ahead of the field. because you were able to stuff your lineup with a little bit more power because of the fact that Griner was 1K cheaper. The thing with Stewie, though, and you're forced to play her now on your main, and I have to accept that, is that she never leaves the floor. She's averaging 34.5 minutes. The game against Japan, she played all but 1 minute in the first half. Dawn Staley, if the game's close in the first half or first three quarters, she's really scared to play Stewie. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Stewie's one of the best players in the world. I get it, but you want to, get these other players more minutes and ready for the knockout round. Because what happens in the knockout round if Stewie picks up 3 first half fouls, or she's having an off night and you haven't been playing, Ariel Atkins at all, or, Nafisa Collier or Fowles or Tina, whoever, they're going to have a lot of problems. So I think that the coaching job that Dawn Staley's done so far is rather poor. They have been able to win and overcome some poor first halves, but as they get into these games against Belgium, we'll see here against France, Spain, some of these upper tier teams, it'll be interesting to see if that, causes them trouble or if they're just able to assert their will and overcome. The guard play for US has been horrific. Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird are in their 5th Olympics. If you think about that, that's every 4 years, so 5 Olympics. That's big time. They're both almost in their 40s, upper 30s. A lot of people think they shouldn't have gotten to come this year. Neither one can play defense very well in their upper age, which has been a problem. Opposing guards have been able to carve them up either, via 3-point shots, like I mentioned, or, driving and dishing down low when they pull the defense towards them. So it's forced Stewie to play a lot more minutes because they just don't have the other personnel to handle not playing her. Skylar Diggins-Smith missed last game with a minor injury. Keep an eye on that. If she misses again, I like Jewel Lloyd at 4-1. She's another one of those sub 5K values that you can certainly, give exposure to. She had 27 minutes against Japan without Skylar Diggins-Smith. So she is a direct beneficiary of SDS being out. She did have 21 fantasy points, which is solid at 4-1. 12 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. She took 6 shots, making 5 of them. Jewel Lloyd's a really good scorer. It's a really cheap price for her. In WNBA terms, she's usually 9 to 10K. So gives you an idea of what kind of value you're looking at with her. But yeah, optimal. I'm going to assume we're going to see 70% ownership on Stewart, probably 65 to 70 on Asia Wilson, with over half of those probably having both in their lineup. So if you think France can kind of keep them in check, or it's going to be a big game by Griner, GPP lineups, fade one of them in at least 1 or 2 of your lineups, or both, because there is a chance Griner outscores them, like I said. Otherwise, cash lineups, head-to-head, single entry, probably going to have to just run the Stewart-Wilson combo because they're just too good, simply because of the minutes they're getting over everyone else. Next game here is Belgium versus China. Belgium is -1.5. I love the money line on them. China has been very good. China surprisingly beat Australia in their last game, and China looks like they're on their way to a quarterfinals knockout stage here. The over-under is 152, so it's fairly high when you consider the rest of the slate. I love the Belgian women's team. They're really strong this season. They have, one of our favorites from last year, Julie Alimond, who was a rookie for Indiana Fever, chose not to play in the WNBA this year because she was focusing on international play. And then Emma Miesemann, with the Mystics team in 2019, I believe, that won the WNBA title. Miesemann was a revelation. Almost it was just MVP like the entire playoffs. She's 11K now after just 2 destruction games of 60 and 61 fantasy points against Puerto Rico and Australia. So 11K, high price to pay for her. I'm glad they raised her price up. She is a must play. Anytime anyone drops a 60 on a women's slate, you're just going to be really hard pressed to be able to beat that anywhere else. So you're going to have to play Miesemann for sure. She's taken 24 shots in the first game, and then 18 in the second. And she's had a total of 24 rebounds in 2 games, 29 and 12 averages. So getting Miesemann in there, pair her up with Alimond. Alimond was at 30 fantasy points last game. It was a blowout. She didn't have to play as much. Still had a solid 10-6-7 line. The reason you got to love Alimond even at 8K is the fact that she's not really a big-time scorer, but she's going to give you a high number of assists. She's going to contribute in rebounds, even though she's one of the smaller players on the floor typically. And she's going to contribute, she's a high-level on-ball defender. She's going to steal it as well. Her averages right now are 13, 5, 9, and 2 steals, 37 fantasy points per game. So I will be pairing the destructive duo of Miesemann and Alimond in most of my lineups, certainly my main. I expect that to be chalky. Miesemann has been over 70% in both slates so far, where Alimond was 27% in the first slate. People slept on her, and then she was 60 last time. Expect both to be extremely high owned. with the U.S., I think we're going to see the, Alimond, Miesemann, Stewart, Wilson 4 in a lot of lineups. That's going to be your chalk, and it's just really about where the other 2 slots you can find yourself getting different. I typically wouldn't look at anyone else on the Belgian side. The Mestal sisters are nice. Hanny Mestal is only 3-3. She had a ceiling game last game where she hit 6 triples, but she's only in there to shoot threes. With so much attention defensively going to Miesemann and Alimond, you could play Hani in one of your GPPs at 3-3 and then stuff the rest of your lineup with 10K studs. Kim plays more minutes. She's averaging 26.5 minutes per game. She's taken 19 shots. She's also a big-time three-point shooter, averaging 24 fantasy points, 20 and 28 in 2 games. 8-1, a little bit of a high price. You'd rather just pay 100 less for Alimond, but you could run a straight Belgian stack. China's defense has been surprisingly really good. Like I said, they controlled that game against Australia pretty much to the end. Australia had a chance to win it, and then they obviously it wasn't on purpose, but you got to be aware of the defensive situation. They fouled them with less than a second left. China was able to escape. Obviously, not having Liz Cambridge hurt them there, but this Chinese team, they know their roles, they know who their best players are, and they're really, really good. Speaking on the China side, Belgium's defense has been really good. Belgium has beaten Australia, and by 15, which a lot of people had Australia. They were the favorites in that game. And then Belgium, like I said, they knocked off Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is by far the worst team in this tournament. China's led by Zhu Han, 8'3". She's a 6'8", 6'9", I think maybe even taller. She's huge. Surprisingly, China doesn't play her a lot. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact they've been playing some teams that prefer to push the pace. Han's not the fastest player in the world. She only played 12 minutes against Australia, 19 against PR, 31 and 16 fantasy points, though, 11-14 against PR. PR is very bad down low. So at 8'3", don't expect a lot of ownership on her. But again, if you're running multiple lineups, Han is going to be somebody who could potentially pop in a 40 here. If China's trying to win out the group stage here and get a better seed, that's what this game here between China and Belgium represents. The winner will be in a different pod that gets to play a worse team. So there is, even though both have clinched, there is benefit here to the 2 teams playing their best players and trying their best. If you want somebody from China, I think 5'7", Euro Lee, we may see her get chased a little bit. She came out of nowhere here. She's been a good player for them in international play, but she's playing well above her head right now. In just 19 minutes of action here so far, she's been averaging some pretty big stats. 16.5 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, over 36 fantasy points per game. She had a 43 against PR, a 31 against Australia. So she's directly benefiting from Han. Euro Lee plays a little bit better in that fast-paced type of game. If Belgium wants to push the pace, expect Lee to still be playing somewhere between 25 and 28 minutes. She could definitely pay off to 5'7". So she's one that may be popular. I do want exposure to her. I would maybe temper expectations a little bit with Miesemann, patrolling the lane, but she's certainly a good player. Zhang Pan at 4'4" is an interesting play. She, against Puerto Rico, played 21 minutes, had 30 fantasy points. That was probably more to do with it being a big blowout, though. So she's more just a GPP play only. The other players that are going to be getting minutes, Meng Li, high level, and Ting Xiao, but they're both kind of middling plays. They'll score between 20 and 25 fantasy points on average. Neither one's priced that well. 7.2 on Li, 6.7 on Xiao. So really, I'm looking at Euro Lee as my main Chinese exposure, and then maybe a little Zhu Han. Last game on the slate here, Puerto Rico versus Australia. You guys have heard me talk about Puerto Rico being the last team or the worst team in this event, and it's pretty easily to tell. They don't have a very tall team. They've been getting destroyed down low. We have seen, the Chinese team really just to beat them on the glass. Then we turn around and saw Belgium light them up, Miesemann with another big game. So there's a really good chance of, Australia winning this game. Australia has to win this game, and they need to do it by a lot. There's a tiebreaker. Canada lost last night, so they're 1-2 in group play. They didn't lose by a ton to Spain, which helps. However, Australia at 0-2, if they lose, they're certainly out. Canada gets in. If Australia wins and they blow out Puerto Rico by, I believe, 20 plus, then Australia will get the quarterfinal spot. There's a few players on Australia to look at, and I think with everybody loading up Belgium and US and maybe even a Chinese player, that Australia is going to go overlooked. First of all, you can go ahead and remove Becca Allen and Leilani Mitchell out of your player pool for Australia. They're the two well-known names. Allen plays for the Liberty, Leilani Mitchell plays over Mystics for WNBA. So they're both well-known names, but they're overpriced. Becca Allen at 8'6" is a big fade. She just doesn't have the type of game needed to break a price like that. You see she's averaging right around 18, 19 fantasy points per game and playing 30 minutes per game. This is definitely an easier matchup for her, but she's really shot reliant. She's going to take a lot of threes. Sometimes she gets steals, but she's not going to be on the glass. Australia, despite not having Liz Cambridge, still has two other capable post players that can really destroy PR here tonight. If Cambridge played for Australia, obviously that game against China would have went a lot different, but this is what they have. So you're going to look at the next tier of players under Beck Allen and Leilani Mitchell, and that starts with Ezzy Magbegor. I'm a Seattle Storm fan. I'm from Seattle. That's my team. I know all about Ezzy. I think she's going to be a future top 10 player in the WNBA. Seattle's already pushing her into bigger minutes. With Liz Cambridge being out of the Olympics, this really gave Ezzy a chance to shine and put her name on the map, essentially. Against Belgium, 9 for 15. She had a 20.8 rebound game, which was solid at the 5K price. The very next game against China, she played 27 minutes, had a 15 and 4. Right around 27. So she's averaging 30 fantasy points. She's still only 5'9". Like I said, she's going to probably be under 40% owned just because that price point in the mid-range. You see so many people stacking stars and scrubs with the broken pricing in Olympics on both the men's and women's side. She just falls into a pricing spot that a lot of people will overlook. So I'm still on Magbegor. This is a must-win game. As I mentioned, Puerto Rico is the best team to target in terms of DVP for front court players. Rebounding, block shots, just everything that you would want to see in your big, they're going to be able to do against Puerto Rico. And then somebody who should be really low owned is Kayla George at 6'8". It's probably a yucky price out when you first glance, but she had 35 against Belgium, which I was pretty impressed by, and then 26 against Belgium. She's averaging 31, another big on the floor, averaging 7.5 rebounds per game. She has 15 in the two. So against Puerto Rico, expect her to play roughly 30 minutes in a must-win, maybe even more, and completely destroy them. So for me, main lineup is Magbegor as always, and then Kayla George in my alts. I think those are the two players for Australia you really want to, zero in on and get most of your exposure there. The other Australia players to look at, Katie Ebsrey at 4 and 9. She's been playing 32, 33, 34 minutes per game. She did have a 31 there against Belgium. She shot 11 times in both games. She had 9 rebounds, 6 assists. She does a little bit of everything. 10, 6, and 5. Just really solid averages for a player that's 4'9". She'll go overlooked as well. If you think, Gabby Williams or this other value play I'm going to mention, or a Jewel Lloyd is going to be higher owned, pivoting over to Ebsrey makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider how fantasy friendly the PR defense is. I think GPP-wise, an Australian mini stack could wind up being optimal. Like I said, they have to win this game to even be considered to get that last quarterfinal spot. They have to win by like 18 to 20 or more to knock out Canada. They're going to play their best players 30-plus minutes, no doubt in my mind. Stephanie Talbot, she also plays for the Storm. She missed the first game with a minor injury. She did come off the bench against China, played 11 minutes. Not really a fantasy relevant player. She's 3'4", which is an interesting price. If she can get hot from long range, she could definitely pay that off, but you're really relying on that. She does have a very good path to making value via her steals as well in the WNBA. She does a fair amount of causing turnovers, but I typically wouldn't want to rely on that. And Jenna O'Hea is another three-point shooter that is predominantly going to get her value just from threes alone. So George and Magbegor and Ebsrey are if you're planning an Australian mini stack, that's the one to look at. And then Puerto Rico, there was a player I didn't get exposure to last time, but I talked about her slightly. And somebody I've had my eye on, I like Jasmine Guathmay from Puerto Rico. She's still only 4'2". She's a really active player, and she's playing big minutes. Puerto Rico has a somewhat deeper rotation, which can be, cost fits for DFS purposes, kind of like the Nigerian team. But she is playing big minutes no matter what. You see she's averaging 31.5 minutes per game. She's 34 and 30. She's getting to the foul line a lot. She does a nice job of drawing fouls. She's drawn 11 in 2 games. She's averaging 25.5 fantasy points. She's just a big-time scorer. She had 21 fantasy points against China, 30 against Belgium, 19 shots against Belgium there, and then 12 against China. So with this being Puerto Rico's, last game, they're not going to get in. They're playing the role of spoiler if they want to try to knock Australia out of the tournament. Look for Jasmine's usage to continue to be high. She's rocking a 30% usage right now, and she's just a real strong play. She's probably my favorite value play, even over a Jewel Lloyd, definitely over Ebsrey, who I mentioned earlier. But at 4-2, she's just a really strong play. The Australia defense has not been impressive to me at all. I've been targeting it at will. Australia got built up as a silver medal favorite in this tournament. They have a high world ranking, but without Liz Cambridge, they're just not the strong defense that you would expect them to be. So I think Guathmay could mess around and get a double-double. Probably not a triple-double, as Ice Cube says, but definitely somebody to consider. Everybody else on Puerto Rico is averaging under 23 fantasy points per game. You could try to play somebody maybe like a Jennifer O'Neill, Quinones, Islas Quinones, but they're very low-level plays. It's just Guathmay from me from this group. I don't think any of the Puerto Rico ladies are going to end up on the optimal besides her. Okay, I'm on my phone. Thank you, though. I'll see you in a second. Sorry about that, guys. Wouldn't be a show if my kid didn't interrupt, as always. So that's pretty much it on the slate there. If you're watching on demand, as I mentioned, go into the Discord in the general room if you're not a sub yet, ask your questions, or in the premium room. Pulling up the prize pick numbers that have come up here, starting with fantasy scores. There are a few that do jump out at me initially. The Gabby Williams 29.5 against USA. I think the under there looks pretty solid. Gabby's been, putting up 30 plus, but again, that's been lesser competition. I don't see her blocking shots or getting rebounds. And she's been in the WNBA. Prior to this year, Gabby's played a few seasons. So there's scouting reports on her. There's tape on her. I think the front court, of Wilson and Griner and Stewie can definitely keep her in check. So I do like the under there. Unders have been paying us well, especially in TBT recently. And then on single points, they don't have the Belgians up yet. Hopefully they will later, so I'll post that. But I do like Stewie, 14 single points. I think she hits the over there, especially if France can keep it close. And if Brittany Griner were to get the minutes, I like her for over 14 as well. If they extend the board beyond this to some of the other games like Belgians or the Australians, I'll have those posted in the article and the prize picks as well. Don't forget, just seeing if you're listening, G. We do have this promotion, as I mentioned, going on. 50% off your first 2 months. That's going to get you covered, all the way through the first part of the college football season. I have pretty full confidence Pete and myself will make you enough money there to pay off the rest of your sub, for the rest of the months and lead you into college basketball, which we know is still our bread and butter, mine at least. And we're going to supplement that with CFL, summer leagues coming up, which we're going to have, Aussie football playoffs. I've been providing content for that or talking it up in the Discord. That's been a really profitable sport for us. The prize pools aren't very good, I know, but there's a lot of edge to be had in these small sports. And if you're playing fit, if there's only enough entries for you to put in 20, 25 bucks on Australia, football, but you're returning $200 or $300 every couple of days, still really good. It's a slow grind, yes, but you're building up your bankroll, and that's what we can offer you. We may not have the fancy, screenshots of 20, 50, 100,000 prize pool, takedowns, but I can guarantee you we're going to be taking, cashing all of our double ups, returning 80 to 100 profit nightly in some of these smaller sports. Pete's taking down MLB stuff for a couple $100. So, just right there, 3 slates with us and you'll have paid off your sub and beyond for a couple months. So definitely mess with us there. We provide you with prize picks, plays, cheat sheets on the main sports. We do shows like this. We have members only Discord shows that we do. We're going to be covering all these niche sports. We have articles for everything that we cover. Esports with CSGO, Aussie football, Olympics, like I said, Summer League, soccer's a big one, Major League Baseball, obviously NFL is a big one coming up, and of course college sports. So mess with us, keep checking us out. Check out the show next week when we cover CFL. It'll be a big breakdown. If you plan on playing that 10K to first GPP, I highly advise you to check out Pete and I as we break down each team, potential roles, breakout candidates, stuff like that. And college football previews are on the way as well. So appreciate those of you who watch live or if you're watching on demand. I'm Walter Riddell at WDeuce85 on all socials. DM me on Twitter, tweet at me there. Any questions on Discord? I usually am always around. I got my phone on me. Best of luck to everybody out there. Appreciate it. Peace.